Welcome to Show Me Sports Legacy. I'm your host, Jeff Crowley, here today with Chris Hockenfels, my co-host. And it's that time of year. Let's talk about some sports.
Well, if you are a sports fan, what a next couple of weeks we are going to have coming up at the end of March and early April. Here's just a list of some of the things you can watch over the next few weeks. The NBA and the NHL are approaching the end of their season. Their playoffs are going to start really soon. The NCAA basketball championships are going on, and we have some local ties, which we'll talk about a little bit later. MLB baseball and minor league baseball have started their seasons, and they're off and running. The PGA Tour has started their season, and the Masters is right around the corner. We have track and field at the high school and college level starting. NCAA softball and baseball are rolling in their seasons. I think that really the only thing that's not going on right now is football. And if you want to get your taste of football, there is NCAA spring football going on, and locally, which we saw a little bit of this weekend, flag football at North Central Missouri College. So sports fan will call the next couple of weeks sports nirvana. There's going to be something that you like to watch or participate in, and it makes for all those stories that are going to be coming down the line.
Now, my Royals are 0-1. Should I be worried?
I've got so much to unpack it just from that first game. But no, it's a long season. Let's give it that first 3 weeks before we make any too harsh of decisions on it.
Oh, man, it's 161 more games. So we'll hope that all works out really good. And we're watching something in the NCAA tournament. They may be out of the tournament by the time this airs. But as we're taping this, Iowa's made it to the Elite Eight with Ben McCollum leading their charge. He did wonders with Drake last year. He won 4 national championships at Northwest Missouri State. He's a Bearcat. Once a Bearcat, always a Bearcat, as we know. It's just something to behold with a lot of local players, including an assistant coach, Jaron Richmond, who played here at NCMC, Bennett Sturts.
Right, players from the area, Sturts from Liberty, and all the ties that we have locally from there. And it is a lot of fun, even if you're not an Iowa basketball fan, to watch local people succeed in that tournament, because there's always some type of magic in that tournament. You don't know where it's going to come from, whether it's going to be an upset here or there, or a mid-major making a run, or someone like Iowa who upsets 2 highly ranked teams to get their shot at the Final Four. So always magic around the NCAAs, and it's even more fun when that magic has some local ties.
We're going to talk basketball. We've got Jacky Payne, who is a Missouri Sports Hall of Fame coach, who is in the Athletics Hall of Fame for North Central Missouri College. Played here at TJC back in the 70s for Coach Gary Garner. He's an excellent player, went on to win 655 games in his high school coaching career, mostly in South Central Missouri, so not so much in North Missouri, but he also played at Missouri Western. So he has these ties back to our area. It's amazing to watch how these threads run through sports, where somebody comes as a young kid, plays, learns from great coaches, and goes on to be a great coach.
And in this year of the 100th year of NCMC, what a lot of great stories have come out, and we've got to be a part of that by having some of those people on the podcast. And when you're around for 100 years, you're going to have stories. You're going to have some great accomplishments, some people that have come through, and we've got another one today that should be a lot of fun.
Today, we welcome Jacky Payne to the Show Me Sports Legacy studio. His basketball journey of 50 years includes multiple all-state selections as a player from Skyline High School, followed by success at Trenton Junior College and Missouri Western State College. He then got into coaching, was successful over a 40-year period with programs like Marshfield, Lebanon, and his alma mater, Skyline. His teams won 655 games with his leadership, competed for state titles, and were known as some of Ozarks' best programs. Inducted into the North Central Missouri Athletics Hall of Fame in 2005, the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame in 2018, and up to today, when Coach Payne will receive alumni honors recognition at the NCMC Pirate Ball, celebrating the 100th year of North Central Missouri College. His connection to the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame is part of its origin story, and we'll talk more about that in the podcast today. So I want to welcome Coach Payne. Thank you for coming here, and we're happy to have you back in Trenton.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here, and, this is a great thing you guys have got going on, you and Chris, and I'm just honored to be here.
We're happy to have you. Now, our podcast is about legacies, and everything about your career speaks about legacy. So let's start with your beginnings as a basketball player, a young kid in South Central Missouri. Describe your early efforts about learning the game of basketball. What was it attracted you to basketball?
Well, it was my dad. I learned a little bit from my dad. We were raised on a dairy farm, so we were milking cows every day. They don't take Christmas or Thanksgiving off, and twice a day, every day. And my dad had played in high school, and he got me a basketball and then started taking me to high school games. As I got a little bit older, he would take me to the Blue and Gold tournament, which is a big tournament in southwest Missouri. And we'd get up early. He'd milk really, really early, and I was about getting ready to 6th grade, 5th grade, right in through there. And he'd take us there, and we'd go all day and watch games all day. And then we'd come back, and then he'd go milk, and I'd go to bed. But just watching games, 8 games a day, would just really got me started. And then Coach Gaines used to be the coach before Barton got there, Bill Barton. And he came down to the elementary school and put on a little one-day thing every once in a while, and we'd do dribbling and all that. And I really got attracted to basketball. So that's how I got my start. Then I went into junior high, and we had one junior high team at Skyline. You know, Skyline, there was 33 kids in my graduating class, so it's not the biggest of schools, but they did have a big heart and appetite for basketball. I got to play on the junior high team, got to start with 4 8th graders, and I was a little 7th grader, and averaged about 2 points a game. And I was quick and athletic, but I just kind of learned how to play, and I was all over the place. And I went to a basketball camp with a guy you probably have heard of, Chuck Williams.
Yeah.
The Springfield rifle, the Buffalo gun. Chuck grew up about 7 miles from our farm. His mom and dad had a feed store and a grocery store where we bought our feed for our dairy cows and our groceries. And Chuck was in college and later, and he took me to a basketball camp at Buffalo with Coach Larry Atwood. Well, you know, Chuck was older and playing at SMS back then, and he actually took me in there and showed me how to shoot a jump shot. And I'll never forget, Jeff, he took and put a piece of tape on the floor about 4 foot from the front of the rim, and he said, you shoot 5 with one hand, five with one hand, and you got to make 5 in a row, blah, blah, blah. And he called it beef, balance, eyes on target, elbow straight, and follow through. And I did that. And then he said, you got to make 5 in a row before you take one step back, and then you do that. Well, I religiously started doing that. I mean, when we get through milking cows and doing chores, I'd go out there to my goal and play and do that drill. Well, I jumped from 2 points a game to over 21 points a game as an 8th grader. You know, I began to really like the game now that I'm having some success. And my 8th grade year, Coach Bill Barton was there, and he took our Skyline team, high school team, to the state championship game, 31-2, finished second. And I set my goal as a player, I want to start on that team. Now, I'm just an 8th grader. Now, you got to realize we had 2 all-state guards on that team. One was a senior, one was a junior, and we had an all-state center, and we had president of the school board's son and the doctor's son, who were both seniors.
Okay.
They're about 6'2" or 6'3".
Tough lineup to crack there, I think.
Yeah, tough lineup to crack. But, you know, as a kid, I never thought about that. I never worried about it. I'm just going to work as hard as I can and get out there and go. So we started off the season, and he started that bigger lineup with the doctor's son, the president of the school board's son, the all-state center, the 2 all-state ended up being guards. And things just weren't working very good. I think we were like 3-2. And back in those days, you could play 4 quarters. So I'd play 2 quarters JV and 2 quarters on the varsity team. So, you know, I've learned a lot from Coach Barton on this. He took those 2 seniors, the doctor's kid and the president of the school board, and set them down. And he brought a freshman guard in, me, quick, and he brought a sophomore forward in that had some quickness and could rebound. So we went small. And we took off from then, and, you know, I think we finished 25-7, went to the Final Four. But I learned a great lesson about coaching then. It's not Coach Barton never, and neither did Coach Garner. They did not play politics. They played to win. They played the best people, and you had a good attitude and worked hard. That's how it's supposed to be.
Love it.
Right at the beginning, we've had this theme, especially in Missouri and the rural areas, that a lot of success in sports comes from this hard-working attitude you get on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
When you're growing up, when you've got to do chores, when you've got responsibility, you learn that I need to be, you know, responsible for this. I need to work hard. I need to dedicate myself. Those things translate because we've had many coaches on here and administrators that got their roots from working hard when they were younger. And that is so good to hear. Another thing that, just going back from the intro, is 600 wins. I mean, we had Coach Garner on about a month ago, and he had 500 wins, and I thought, man, who's got more than 500 wins? And here we are just a month later, and you've got 600. I don't know if we can get someone with 700 wins in here next month, but
You
what
know,
an accomplishment.
Chris, if Coach Garner would have put me at the shooting guard instead of the point guard, he'd have had more wins.
Oh, that is classic. Well, I hope he listens to this.
I hope he hears that.
You know, he actually told me that a few years later. And he also said, you know, I had the perfect fast-breaking team with you and James Claiborne and Bill Presley and Butch Allen and, you know, you guards. We could have just tore people up, but it was slow it down and pound it inside and so on. But that was okay. I learned a lot. I would like to say one more thing about a high school thing here. There was a guy named Ronnie Rush that ended up playing for Silent Springs at Skyline. And so every day we did a lot of like a one-on-one drills, you know, defense and offense. And as a freshman, Ronnie was kind of my idol when I was an 8th grader. I got in front of him or in back of him every day in line to start the season. Now, most little freshmen's going to run back to the back of the line, get as far away from Ronnie Rush as possible. I didn't. And he'd get out there and just, you know, really use me. And I'll never forget this one day that we were playing top of the key, hand it to Ronnie Rush. I'm on defense. And I mean, I was all over him, draped over him. He had 31 in one of the Final Four games, by the way. He shot it, drilled it. It would have been a 3-point today. So handing the ball again, I'm down my defensive stand, you know, shot it, drilled it again. Barton sitting there just fuming, looking at me. I handed it to him again. He made a move, and I'm going, there's no way. And I mean, he's a little taller, but I was just there. 3 in a row, he drilled from the top of the key. So on the 4th one, I go hand him the ball. I get down in defensive stance, and all of a sudden I feel this foot come up behind me and kick me in my backside, and I go flying into Ronnie. And Barton said, "Damn it, Payne, you're playing just like a freshman." And I wanted to say, "Coach, I am a freshman," but no way would you ever say that to your coaches back then.
Well, one of the things that was clear, and you were on a lot of all-star teams, and you didn't have the height. Here's his record, okay? In high school, they had a record of 105-19 during the 4 years. Scored 1,953 points, according to at least one source that I looked at. Averaged 21 points a game as a junior, repeated it with 21 points a game as a senior, and shot, get this, 57.5% from the field his senior year.
Is that good? I think that's good.
Yeah, a lot of practice and stuff and good teammates, but everybody, you know, I've had this philosophy, Jeff, you play to your strengths. And I did take several shots, but I practiced more than my teammates. I mean, I'm just being honest. I outworked them. They were great guys. But, yeah, we had a lot of success with that. And the one thing that I'm proud of people don't really know of too much, they pick an All-Ozarks team in southwest Missouri. They pick 5 players from all the way over to Joplin, up to Rolla, down to the Arkansas line, up to Sedalia. I was lucky enough, and then they pick a second 5. As a sophomore, I made that second 5, which means 10 players out of over 100 high schools. And I made that as a sophomore. I was very proud of that. And then my junior and senior year, I was first team All-Ozarks. And that's a lot harder to make, actually, in the all-state teams because you got all your big classes of schools and everything else. So that was really cool.
Now, we teased Coach Garner when some of the articles I read talked about his long-distance shooting range, but it referred to his shot as a set shot.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said, wait a minute, I didn't jump very high, so they may have thought that. But I saw a picture of you, and Chris, you'll understand this from the time era. His jumping height on his jump shot was above the tube sock level of the defending player. And I mean, tube socks went all the way to the knee.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were getting off the ground and had some get up and go. And you also had this explosiveness because in the stats in his senior year, you had 100 assists, you had 95 rebounds, 69 steals, in addition to scoring 21 points a game.
I was athletic. Like I say, everybody, you know, it's not how big you are in life, it's how good you are. And I've always told our players that. Don't put a lid on a kid and don't hamper yourself by something like that. But we didn't work on weights because we were always hauling little bales of hay and feed and milk and all that stuff. We didn't do weights.
Buckets. We've heard a lot about buckets.
A lot of buckets. So I was pretty muscular and I could jump. And I mean, I could jump. I could dunk a volleyball in my prime. It was just attributed to a lot of hard work and just being at my size, I had to be quick. I had to be athletic, and I had to be actually pretty smart. You had to think about the game and what to do. I know on my jump shot, I learned that, you know, you kind of learn how to shoot it the right way, but I figured out at my height to get over some of those 6'3", 6'4" guys, they're going to stick in your face. You had to really get up there, and you had to get up there quick. So I really practiced a lot, just explosive, dribble down, hit the spot, and go up. I will say this about Skyline's gym. If you've ever driven by Skyline, it's got that dome, and there's no air conditioning. And back in the day when I got my driver's license, and we lived about 13 miles from this, I could drive in, and the custodian, they'd let me come in, and I knew where the basketballs were, and I'd go in there by myself. And that was about 100, and it seemed like it was 140 in there, but it was probably about 110. And I'd be up and down the floor just dribbling and shooting. I'd close my eyes, start on one end, go as fast as I could to the other end. I counted my steps, so you only crashed in the wall once that way, if you were smart. But I mean, then they're working, and I got some of my other guys were out. They were kind of going on dates a little more and stuff like that. And it's, oh man, it's been 100 degrees here, and you're in the gym. But I'm just saying to be successful, you got to work at it.
I talk to my kids all the time, and they go, "Coach, what do I need to do to be a better shooter?" And I go,
"Get in the gym.
500 shots a day minimum. Let's start there. They don't understand that. Yeah. Now, this is kind of speaking to the colloquial terms of the newspaper era. So this is a description of you, and I just want you to interpret this for us. So in 73, you made the All-Ozarks team, and the Springfield paper referred to you as Payne, 5'9" pepper pot from Skyline High School. Now, what in the world is a pepper pot? You got a definition for that? I've got one if you don't.
Well, somebody who's feisty and hot and I guess peppery. I don't know. It's
that is good. Highly energetic. Somebody who adds a little spice to the situation and has a lot of energy. And clearly, that was an affectionate term that they used.
Yeah.
And we talked off air a little bit about Skyline Urbana, about that area, just within, say, an hour's drive to that gym. So much talent and so many people that loved basketball. And I think that tradition has continued over the last 30, 40 years and all the basketball that has come out of that little gym.
Like I say, it started with the boys program, and they had some good teams even before Barton got there, but he took it to the next level. Basically you did two things at Skyline. You milked cows and you played basketball. And that's kind of how life went down there. But the people got behind you, had the kids at school, a lot of enthusiasm back there, and it's still going. The boys went to Final Four a few years ago. Kevin Cheek has taken the girls. He's just a great, great coach, and he just got a system because he's got these girls coming through that they're parents have played, and they know what to expect, and they don't give him any lip or anything. I mean, they're going to work hard and get after it and guard you from the time you're on the bus, and that's kind of what we did. Barton instilled into us. We did the box press, 2-2-1 box press, kind of like UCLA, and then we'd drop back to a man-to-man once the ball basically crossed the top of the key at the other end. Then we matched up in a tough man, pressure on the ball, denying every pass, and it just wore people down. I'll say a couple more things about Barton. I got to tell you this about Barton and Kimberling. So we would have like 3-hour practices, and we'd have like 16 kids total, JV varsity. And at least every day we spent 15 minutes just running at the end. You go around the gym, up the stairs, down and back around the gym. But we spent about 45 minutes to 50 minutes every day just in the press alone. So you're doing all this pressing, and then you're doing this running. So Barton would come in there, and Kimberling, they would say, okay, we're doing the stairs. And we had a guy named Rick Reddies, and Rick should have been a cross-country All-American. And he'd say, you guys take off and go running, I'll tell you when to stop. Well, and then he'd say, Rick better not beat any of you. And that just challenged Rick Reddies to go, I'm going to beat you guys. And we say, Rick, slow down, man, slow down. I was quick, but he could just go miles and miles and miles. So we'd take off and go, and the coaches didn't stay there with us most of the time. They just sort of disappear, and we go, well, maybe we went to the coach's office. They're figuring out stuff. Well, there's a little Dairy Queen called Mr. Ed's Drive-In on 65.
I know where that's at. You betcha. You're right.
Coach Barton and Coach Kimberling would start us off running, and then they would go down there and get an ice cream or a Coke, and then they would come back and make sure we were still running and still alive. I mean, I didn't find that out till years later. And the other thing about back in those days, you're talking about changes, be hydrated and all that stuff. No. We had salt pills, man.
I remember
You've heard about that, salt pills. So you'd take these pills of salt kind of before you started. You got your drink, your one little drink, and then you go 3 hours without anything. It was pretty amazing.
So you did great in high school. What took you to Trenton Junior College? What were some of the options you had coming out of high school?
Dury had contacted me, Southwest Baptist. I kind of wanted to go to SMS, but they weren't, they're still looking at me. John Brown University, Delta State, and then, of course, Coach Barton up at State Fair. And everybody thought that was a given. I was just going to go play for him. Well, one day, Coach Garner was down there recruiting my teammate, Jerry Bybee, who was a really good player, too. They were up in the bleachers, and Coach Garner was sitting here, and Jerry was over on his right. And I'm down on the other end of the court after school. I mean, the season was over, just shooting. Well, you ever have one of those days when you're just in the zone? I just started lighting it up, way behind the three-point line, and just everything I shot. Well, Garner was here talking to Jerry on his right, but he kept looking down there to the left. And pretty soon he was talking to Jerry, but he's just staring down there at me the whole time. And I could see he was looking, so I just kept shooting, man. And pretty soon when he got through talking to Jerry, he came there and said, "Do you mind if I come back and talk to you about playing?" I said, "Sure." So he came back. Coach Garner, there's a lot about him, but he always made you feel special, and he had a great way with your mom, your parents. You know, a lot of this recruiting stuff, it goes down.
Oh, yeah.
The mom's got to kind of like the guy, but it's a great guy, and that's how I ended up. I didn't come up here really for the high school gym to play in. I came up here to play for Coach Gary Garner. And Norm Stewart called me. I was kind of on Missouri's radar, and he called me and said, we've been watching you a little bit, and we think you need a little seasoning, and you can go play some JUCO, and then we'll visit later. So,
what a great quality as a coach that when you said his number one thing is he made you feel special, and you probably learned a lot from him, and that's really, really cool. And that high school gym, just talk about that a little bit of what it was like to go from playing in a high school gym to go play college, but then also end up playing in a high school gym.
To me, it wasn't that big a deal, but I will say this. Trenton really got behind the JUCO program. I mean, we were packing the place. There was excitement. There was buzz. And it wasn't always where you played. It's how you played and who you played in front of. And that made a huge difference to me. And the newspaper had a lot of articles. We had a lot of support. The student body, they'd come out. The college student body, and then plus the kids here in Trenton would come out because we played an exciting brand of basketball. I think we were 21-10 or 22-9 or right in the top 10 in the country there for quite a while in both those years.
And big rivalries with schools like Moberly. And,
yeah.
We've heard some of those stories from Coach Garner and some other people that played JUCO for Trenton Junior College.
Yeah, I'd say State Fair and Moberly were probably two of the main ones, plus Penn Valley and Coach Pullman. Of course, they had Clay Johnson that came on, I think it was my sophomore year, his freshman year. A lot of good teams. We played teams in Iowa and played teams in Kansas. Played some really good competition and against some really good players that went on to play, good D1 schools or good colleges later on.
You had some success against your old coach because those first couple of games against State Fair, 11 points in a win and 4 late free throws in a 1-point win in Trenton later in the season. That must have been fun to show out good in front of your old coach.
Yeah, I brought that deal there, and one of those things in the folder is me dribbling the ball and Jerry Bybee guarding me. And then plus one of them was me making the 2 free throws there. So that went right down to the wire, and we had a lead, and they elected to foul me for some reason in the last 34 seconds, and I made 4, and we ended up winning by 1. So 4 in a row and good win. And like I say, my former teammate was guarding me there in one of those pictures. So
that's fun.
It was pretty cool. Plus my former coach, which Coach Barton, I think the world of him, but it's pretty cool atmosphere.
Okay, so you had 2 great years at TJC. Who were some of the other players you played with that really stood out to you?
Oh, yeah, there were several. Of course, you can't forget James Claiborne. James and I both came here the first year in 6'8" out of Vashon, and just a great rebounder and shot blocker. He could score some too, but he didn't have just a feathery touch to start with. But James is just a great guy, and he was just fun to be around. But Bill Presley is probably one reason that Garner ended up down there and talking to me, and because he played at, I got a great story to tell you about Bill Presley. Okay, have you ever heard of a guy named Mitch Haskins? Coached at Alton, Missouri, and then went to Fairgrove, and then went to Wren Lake Junior College in Illinois. Great coach. Coach Haskins moved from Alton to Fairgrove, and they're like Class S, and he brought Bill Presley and another guy with him, or just say those guys happened to move to Fairgrove from Alton.
Happened to move.
So their job, they're going to come and beat Skyline. Well, we played them and beat them. They had 4 losses that year, and we beat them 3 times.
Oh, that's sweet.
And Bill was on that team. Now, here's the funny part of that story, though. Coach Haskins had a big flair for these jumpsuit kind of things, a high collar, and he would wear this red-looking jumpsuit thing and just looked like a fire hydrant or a Christmas tree out there. Now, my mom was the sweetest lady you'd ever want to meet, 5'3". She was the supervisor of OCAC, community center, where they help needy people get food and keep the heat on and clothing. Just a kind-hearted lady until you got her in a basketball court. And then something strange happened. My dad wouldn't even sit by her a lot of games. She became vicious. Well, usually it's towards the referee. But Coach Haskins walks in, this red suit on, and I mean, she just like a bird dog on point. She started calling him Christmas tree and fire. I don't know why she did this. It was kind of embarrassing. So we played, we beat him and everything. But here's the key to that story. Later on in life, I was coaching at St. James. I was going up to Norm Stewart's camp where, we're going to work the camp. You have a coaches meeting before the camp, and I'm walking across the thing to the building, and I see this coach coming. He's walking across there. And I look at him. He looks at me, and I say, "Oh, Coach Haskins, how you doing?" He said, "Oh, hey, Jacky, how you doing?" The very next word out of his mouth was, "How's your mother?" "How's your mother?" I said, "Coach, I got to apologize." I said, "She's not that way." He just laughed. He's been around long enough, but that was just a great,
that's funny.
Great situation. "How's your mother, Jacky?" After all those years, I hadn't seen him.
That's funny. Okay. So after TJC, there's a story that said you had signed at Central Methodist, but you ended up at Missouri Western.
Well,
how did that come about?
I was going to go wherever Garner went, and he applied at Central Missouri State, and I think he applied at Southwest Baptist, and I'm pretty sure he had the Southwest Baptist job. But back in the day, the last question they asked him, I probably don't, maybe I shouldn't say this on the air, but I'm going to. They said, "You will be going to the Baptist church at Southwest Baptist." That's part of the coaching interview, the last question. And he said, "Yes, I will. But my wife is Catholic. She'll be going to the Catholic church." I think they asked him the question again. "You will be going to the..." He said no. Guess what? He comes in second. I'll back this up to Filbert and how I ended up there. We'd actually scrimmaged Missouri Western. I think back in the day, you're allowed one scrimmage. And so Filbert, I guess I caught his eye way back in my first year there. While I'm doing this stuff waiting on Garner, Filbert recruits probably about 5 or 6 guards. And I was, I think, number 1 on his list, but he said he'd going with Garner. So he gets all these guards recruited. Next thing I know, I turn around, he has all these guys. Garner's not going anywhere. So there I am. Well, here's Larry Hawley. Larry Hawley, great coach, great guy. God bless him. He had been recruiting me like crazy.
Jameson, Missouri, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he had been recruiting me to go to Central Methodist. Matter of fact, he met one of my former players somewhere. This is later on in life, and he had it there at a restaurant. They were there, and they got to talking basketball, and he said, Jacky Payne and all this. And he said, Jacky Payne is the guy I recruited my most highly recruited player ever recruited. So I go, sign with Larry. I'm going to go to Central Methodist. I go to his basketball camps, help him with camps and all that. 2 weeks before school, he goes to Northwest as an assistant. So he thinks he's going to take me with him. So I go up there, and I can't think of the guy's name that's the head coach then. He thinks I'm too short to play there. So I didn't get there. So I'm at Central Methodist. So there I am. And
Without Coach Hawley.
Without Coach Hawley. So Gene Bartow's cousin or nephew, Tom Bartow, came in, and Gene was at Alabama, Birmingham. So Tom comes in, and he's a good guy, and he did a pretty good job, but I wasn't feeling it. I called Filbert, Coach Filbert, said, "Hey, are you still interested?" He goes, "Oh, yeah." I said, "What do I need to do?" He said, "You can practice, don't play any games at semester, transfer, we'll get you in. You have to set out this next semester, but then you have 2 years left." So that's basically how I ended up at Missouri Western.
Now, you had success at Missouri Western, but it did seem like there was a lot of guards in the mix, and you had some injuries. My one Achilles heel wasn't my Achilles heel, but it was my ankles, mainly my right ankle, and I kept turning that thing and did it in junior college several times, and then I went up to Missouri Western. And I started off, and started in stuff, and then I started my senior year or something, but I had my ankle in a cast 3 times there in a 12-month period. Now, back then, if it got too bad, they put you in a cast. You didn't have this walking boot thing and all this rehab. You just cast it up.
This is another learning, teaching moment that I learned. So I'm going along, and we had a guard from Chicago, Wendell Humes, and he was 6'2", point guard, good athlete, pretty good player. So he kind of comes in and takes my spot. So I'm not real happy about it. So I'm going to go visit with Coach Filbert. I'm going to have my little say-so with Coach Filbert. So I walk into Coach Filbert's office. He was such a wonderful guy. He had a way with words, and he could really just promote and just work things out where you could see it in black and white. And he said, our trainers told me you shouldn't even be playing anymore. You're going to have maybe some lifelong damage. He said, we've got Wendell. I want you to be like a mentor to him. You'll still be on the team, be uniform. I mean, I finished out the season. I got to play a little bit. I went from, going in that moment to I'm going to really just let him have it, to learn a lifelong lesson. He could always see the plan ahead and what needed to be done for me, for the team, and for, Wendell, of course. And that's I really appreciated that. And that just really, struck home with me. How you can be thinking one way, the next moment you've changed your thought pattern.
And some people are really good about thinking big picture. When some people are so in the moment and have tunnel vision, you come across people that have eyes for the big picture, and they can see how this is all going to work out as a puzzle later. And it sounded like that worked out for everybody.
I saw a quote from Norm Stewart about Coach Filbert. I think it was part of his Hall of Fame stuff, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he was great about figuring out how to get the right people involved and then get out of their way and let them do their job.
That's fabulous you said that, because he did go up there and he's working with coach assistant, and then he became associate athletic director for a while. The governor called on him to kind of get the Show Me State games off the ground, the President's Council on Physical Fitness. So the first year somebody else sort of tried it. Then they got a hold of Coach Filbert. He was a master at organizing things. The master at it. He could organize anything. So he said, we're going to get this going. So Rich Fairchild, basketball coach, brother of Bob Fairchild, uncle of David Fairchild. Rich was a really good high school basketball coach as well. So he said, we're going to get this Show Me State games off and going. So he kind of made Rich the top guy, and I was like assistant. He made commissioner, and I was assistant commissioner. Me and Rich running the deal. Well, it started off, it did really well. And then he said, we want to make it bigger. We got to get more teams, get more revenue, more stuff happening. And that thing grew so fast that we didn't have enough refs. We really didn't have enough facilities to make this Show Me games really work. And people were bringing teams in from everywhere around the state. And there were times at night, like at 10:30 at night, the referees would walk off and there'd still be a game to go. So I'd go out there with one whistle, I'd referee this game, and then it'd be in the books, and you got to figure out the next day's thing and so on. But Coach Filbert really got that to Show Me State games off and going.
Now, I had a discussion with someone just recently about the Show Me games, and the stat out that at the Show Me State games in the nation were the biggest state-run game association in the United States.
That's right, Chris. It became the biggest tournament or sports event in the United States.
Wow.
And I did that for years and years and years. Of course, later on, we tried to get the Missouri Basketball Coaches Association up and running. He became the executive director. And after I told you about that little meeting, he always put me in a role of leadership. He put me in a spot to help and be leaders in anything he ever did. And that's really helped my career later on.
I had a dream to be in the over 50 3-on-3 tournament at the Show Me games, and I broke my leg at 49. Because I played.
Yeah, right.
Until I was 49. Right. And then my buddies got a little heavy, and we didn't have the firepower. We never got that accomplished.
I'd like to say a couple more things about Coach Filbert. So he would get the Booster Club, and they like to go places. So, I'm a kid from Skyline, milking cows, country kid, and we got to fly. We went to Las Vegas. We played at Florida State. We played at Pepperdine out in California. Went to Ole Miss. And probably the biggest one, even though the smaller school, we got to play Larry Bird at Indiana State. Now, this was the year before he went and played against Magic. Indiana State was packed. Yes, Bird can jump. He had a dunk to start the game. I did get to foul him twice. I got to foul Larry Bird twice. Highlight of my career. Let me say something about Garner, backing up to following your coach. So we were like 9-1. We go to Cloud County, Kansas to play in this tournament. And we're ranked in the nation. And we're in a station wagon. There's 2 station wagons. David Fairchild was like our manager's trainer guy. So Coach Garner was in one. He'd usually get the starters with him, and then David would drive the other. We took off, and Garner just took off driving, man. He was just going. David was left in the dust. Well, then Garner kept looking at his mirror and said, "Where's David?" And we looking back. He's not here. He's supposed to be right behind us. But one of the guys had forgotten their tennis shoes. David had turned back and went back to Trent to go find the tennis shoes. So he got him. Well, then David takes off, and Garner's driving around Trenton looking for David. So then we take off, and we're going down the road, and then they had a flat tire in David's car. He had to pull it over, and there was some kind of garage there on the side of the road. And we just go zooming by, and nobody saw it, but David was out there waving at Coach Garner, "Hey, we're right here, we're right here." Garner just chewed him up sideways. And, David is thinking about the team. We got to have one of our other guys needs these tennis shoes, Coach. So we go in there and we play these guys, and we're up at halftime. But we start the second half, and I'm dribbling down the court, and I'm at the top of the key, and the lane just opens up. So I dribble in there, and I lay it in, and then boom, this guy hits me at about knee level. And I go crashing right on my arm, my head, my back on the floor. Well, it ended up hairline fracture in my left arm. And I'm in pain. I'm a pretty tough kid, but I was in pain. Garner just comes out there and grabs me under the shoulders, drags me over, throws me on the bench, and he was hot. This trainer guy for the tournament came and asked, he said, "You want me to take him to the hospital?" I said, "Yeah." So he took me to the hospital. And my elbow swelled up like bigger than a softball. I mean, there's fluid everywhere. I couldn't move my left arm. And I'm in there waiting, and I look, and pretty soon the emergency room doors swing open, and there's Doug Elliott, our leading scorer from Spickard up here. And they elbowed him in the head, and he had a concussion.
Oh, man.
So this story gets even better. So he's in there, I'm in there, and he eventually gets out. But they keep me Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Tournament gets over Saturday night. We lost all 3 games. Garner is madder than a wet hen. I'm injured. Doug couldn't play. And so very last thing, he comes by at night to pick me up, and we're going back to Trenton. So I'm sitting there in the seat next to him, and he first word to, "Not one of you better say a word the whole trip back. Not one hear one word." Everybody just zipped it. So we're driving along there somewhere in Kansas, and it's like a 4-lane, 2 lanes and 2 lanes. And we're going in the middle of the night. It's probably 1 o'clock or so. And pretty soon the lanes switched to 2-lane, but Garner just stayed in that 1 lane, kept driving. Pretty soon we see these headlights coming towards us at a fast pace. Garner goes, "What the heck? There's a guy coming head on." So we got over in the other lane. And he goes, "Well, he's kind of said a few choice words about that driver." And I said, "Coach, for the last 3 or 4 miles, you've been driving the wrong way down a 2-lane road in Kansas, the middle of the night." And he goes, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" I said, "You said don't say a word till we get back to Trenton."
Great story. Coach, you said don't say a word.
That's it. We follow his rule. Okay, so you become a young coach, you go to St. James, have some success, and Marshfield comes calling.
Yeah, St. James took over there, and Coach Filbert, again, it's connections, and I think St. James had called Coach Filbert. They said, "Who would you recommend?" And he said, "Me." And I was actually getting married and going on a honeymoon, and they called me, and I said, "Well, I'm going to be gone for 9 days." They said, "We'll talk to you when you get back." Come back, and they offered me the job, and I go up there, and it was a building process, a learning process, but by the 4th year, we were ranked in the top 10 in the state. By the 5th year, we had a 25-0 season going in the district championship and so on. So it taught me a lot. I've learned a lot. So all these good coaches I played for, Barton and Kimberling and Garner and Filbert, you don't try to be actually any one of them, but you try to be parts of all of them. You take the best from each one, and you try to fit that to your personality. And I think that's how you become successful. Norm Stewart or Dean Smith, you had all these guys, and you just watch coaches, you talk to coaches. Bud Lathrop, I spent a lot of time talking to Bud Lathrop, Raytown South. So I was a young coach, but I would pick their minds and try to learn stuff. And I think that's how you have success.
So you got to Marshfield, and they had been a losing program, and you kind of got them going in the right direction. Then you get to the Final Four in that year 2, go 29-2 and win the 3A Coach of the Year. award in the state of Missouri. And a third-place game where you had an injured star player who came back and fought through that to play that third-place game.
David Lurvey, he was 6'5". He played for Chuck Williams down at Missouri Southern, started all 4 years, and he turned his ankle really bad in that semifinal game against Fulton and didn't think he's going to be able to get back out there. But Fulton beat us by 1. They lost to Charleston by 1 in the state championship. That's how close we were. I've had some really crazy things in these Final Four games. Let me back up to that team here. Here's how we got there. We went through the season. We won 22 games in a row. We go to Ozark. They ranked second in the state. They beat us by 19 at their place. So I'm going, man, we're going to have to play them before we go to the Final Four. I got to figure this out. So I go down to the VHS store and I rent a Three Stooges movie. I come back. They came into practice. They're looking around. There's no basketballs anywhere. I said, line up on the baseline. So every kid lined up. We ran 38 suicides, 2 for each point we got beat by. And on each one of them, I'm saying, we can beat these guys. We just got to do this. We can't play scared. So when it was over, I said, now we're going to go watch the game film of last night. Well, I had the Three Stooges queued up. I walk in there, push the button. I queued it up. I said, watch how you played. This is how you act. This is, things you saw. Just watch yourself. Three Stooges came on there doing all the silly stuff, like the Three Stooges did. A couple of them started to laugh, and it goes, don't laugh. He'll make us go back out there again, and all this. And, we watched about 3 or 4 minutes. I said, hey, we're going to beat these guys. We can beat them. I'll make some adjustments. Just don't play scared. Just bring it. And lo and behold, we played them in the state quarterfinals and 20-point turnaround, beat them by 1, went to the Final Four.
Outstanding. Let's talk 89.
Well, in 89, we lost a lot of people in 87, had some young ones. We made it to state quarterfinals in 88. We lost to George Wilson, a Hall of Fame coach and a great coach. Lost him by 2 in the state quarterfinals. And then we get to the 89 team, and we lose to Ozark again. We get all the way to the state finals, and we're getting ready to play Lamont Frazier and Charleston. Lamont Frazier had 42 points against somebody in St. Louis. I'm going, what in the world are we going to do with Lamont? Because Lamont, one of his legs was equal to 2 of any one of my guys. He was a monster. So we go out there and we play them. Lamont had 12 points, but 23 rebounds, state record. They would not foul Lamont out. Lamont was the star of the state tournament, and he knocked us every which way but loose. So we're at the end of the first quarter, and I had a guy named Tim Jackson. I called him Axon Jackson, about 6'1", 6'2". He did a little bit of everything. Wasn't the leading scorer, wasn't the leading rebound, but he did everything. He really made us go. All of a sudden, the ref throws the whistle, send the trainer out there. They pull him over the bench. They put a brown paper sack. He was hyperventilating. Now, this kid had played for me for 4 years, never once hyperventilated. And he just couldn't breathe, and they had him sitting on the bench. Go back out, start second quarter. About a minute into the second quarter, Dale Fraker, 6'5", averaging over 18 points a game, skinny as a rail. He comes over, their trainer goes out there, and he's holding his hand up on his face. Well, he went to shoot it, and they were face guarding somewhat. Well, they poked him in the eye. So I'm sitting there looking up at Dale and looking down at Tim. I'm going, this is a state championship game. Here we are, and we're playing Charleston, and I got these 2 guys. Well, Dale says to me, Coach, I can't really see out of this eye. And I said, Dale, it's a state championship. Look, you got another eye. Use it. Well, he used it all right. He was 1 for 10, and we lost by 5 in the state championship game. But we were that close in that game as well, so it was just crazy.
By then, you just had a frenzy. Marshfield had a lot of boosters. That you had 2,000, 2,500, maybe 3,000 people coming to these games, following you and just stuffing these gyms. That must have been fun when you get the community rolling like that.
Oh, it was. Going from kind of like the shoe mat or, the mat of the conference, so to speak, and coming in there and making – my first year there, we played Rogersville, Gary McDaniel. Had won state, ranked number 1. We played them in the blue and gold tournament. We played them the first time, they beat us 34. Played them again a couple weeks later, they beat us 21. And I tell our guys, we're going to make some adjustments here. Number 1 seed in the blue and gold tournament, we're number 5. We knock off number 4. We're playing them in the semifinals. We beat them by 10 or 11. That's a win that, coaches need a quality win to start taking.
A signature win.
Signature win, yeah. To turn around. That turned the whole program just like, whoa, overnight. I mean, people came out. That was a signature win. They only lost 3 games that year to us, Philadelphia Roman Catholic and the TSC, and they lost to Charleston, I think, by 1 in the state championship.
Okay, so I got a couple quotes here.
Yeah.
This one was at a banquet after that 89 group, and you went to Morrisville, I think, and you were talking to some boosters, and you talked about how you do things. You had built your program, right? You're 4 years in. I tell them right up front how things are going to be. We want our program to run a certain way. I'm going to coach it. The players are going to play. The refs are going to ref, and the parents are going to parent.
Exactly. That was my motto, my theme. We always had a preseason parent meeting and players meeting. Players play, coaches coach, parents parent, and everybody needs to know what uniform they're wearing that night because that's how it's going to be. And I said the refs ref, but I said sometimes the refs do need a little help. That's just you got to set the standards there, Jeff. If any program you want to do or anything you want to do in life, you got to lay the groundwork. This is how it's going to look. We had a classy program. Our kids went to class. They wore ties to games. We walk into a gym, and these people are going, wow, look at these guys. And another thing coaches would say, especially young coaches, how do you get your kids to play so hard? And I'd look at them and say, it's easy. They go, well, how do you do it? I said, they either play hard or they don't play. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. And some of these guys, well, no. They knew it right up front. You got 12 uniforms. Use somebody else if you're not going to play hard.
Now, you came off of that high and then started a little slow that next year. You lose 5 starters and whatever. And this is your quote in the paper. You went 1-3 in the first 4 games, and you go, I'm 1-3, and I've got 2 dang houses in Marshfield.
Yeah.
I've got more houses than wins.
Yeah.
It's a humbling profession sometimes.
Yes, it is. We had 1 house, and we bought another one before that one sold. So I'm sitting there. That's right. I had more houses than wins at that time. I'd forgotten I'd said that. But yeah.
You're a good quote. Good quote. And you talked about that blue and gold tournament. Just give us a quick rundown. You won it as a player. You won it as a coach.
Yeah.
And it's a big thing. We have holiday hoops up here, which at different times has been a really big thing. But there's a lot of rivalries and a lot of stuff that happens down there.
Oh, yeah. You get the big school, small school thing going on. That was really the highlight other than going to the Final Fours of my playing and coaching career. The sophomore year, we took second. We lost to Springfield Parkview. My junior year, we won the blue and gold, and we beat Willard, who took third in the state in Class M, S, M, and L back then.
Yes.
We came out and played hard. We just took it to people. It didn't matter. We could wear them out, honestly. 32 minutes of in your face, eventually something's got to give. You would just wear them out. But I got to be the leading scorer that year as a winner. And then supposedly they did a book on this about the blue and gold. And I won it as a player and won it twice as a coach. Only guy to ever win as a player, twice as a coach, and be the leading scorer the year that they won it in the 70 or 80 year history of the blue and gold tournament.
That's fun. That's fun stuff. Now, you went from Marshfield to Lebanon. Now, there's a fellow that lives up here in Trenton that played for you by the name of Josh Gottman.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Baptist pastor.
Yeah.
And I messaged him when I found out there was that connection. And he said your coaching mantra was physically aggressive, mentally alert. He said he's remembered that his whole life. Does that sound familiar to you?
Exactly. On every, like those T-shirts up there behind you, we put that on every camp T-shirt. Be physically aggressive and mentally alert. In basketball and life as well. So we're going to come out there and play hard, but we're going to basically use our head and try to play smart as well. So I'm glad he remembered that.
That's pretty cool.
Remembered that.
And he also remembered that you had a blue and gold semifinal against Nixa, where you were down maybe 15 points, came back, tied the game, but ultimately lost the game in the semis. And he said that he and several of the players were pretty emotional. I mean, they expended so much energy. And they were down, and they had to come back and play a third-place game the next day.
Yeah.
And he said that you allowed them to show that emotion, and then you said, boys, we're going to come back and play tomorrow.
Yeah.
And he said they played free and won that third-place game pretty easily.
I think throughout my life, I don't know how smart I was, technically, but I was always spontaneous, and I always had a pretty good read on people. I could kind of read the room, read the kid. Everybody's a little different. And like I say, life is a people business. I think I said that earlier on. So that was just one of my strengths, and it really helped me a lot in life and in coaching.
Well, it's funny how this comes around. Josh's son, Guy, was the best player on the junior high basketball team this year, and I'm the assistant coach.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that kid playing in high school.
Yeah. I think Josh was on the last team at Lebanon to win the district. My third year, we went from Marshfield And I only moved up there because Howard left. He went to Lebanon. And then the next year, an opening came open in basketball, and he called me. And I went up there because things in Marshfield, they hired a different superintendent. I know it's all, how business works. Mm-hmm. So I went up there to be with him, and man, we started off, I think, 0-10. You're seeing these success. But we weren't getting beat 30 and 40. We were getting beat 12 and 14. Just starting a freshman, 2 sophomores, 1 junior, 1 senior, bringing another sophomore in. By the end of the year, we were playing. West Plains, we got beat by 4, and I think they went to the Final Four that year. We turned things around, but I'm going, I made a big mistake coming here after I've started off 0-10. But then in 3 years, we're 22-8. We take Columbia Rockbridge into state quarterfinals, take them right down, lose by 5 points. And they were 29-0 at that time. So that's how you progress. You build a program. Always build your house from the ground up. Good foundation, fundamentals and foundation.
Is Lebanon have the nickname the Little Herns, their gym? Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Talk about that a little bit, because I've heard that and was always curious about why that was called that.
Yeah. Boswell Auditorium, there's a guy named John Boswell and George Boswell, and they had the stave bolt plant, which made whiskey barrels and everything else. So John had these 2 sons that played, and he came in there, and there was the older Jim, and this is a funny story. So he comes in there, he's halftime of the game, and he's sitting on these hard bleachers over there in the other gym, and he goes in the bathroom, he's standing there by the urinal, he looks at a guy, and he's complaining. The guy says, "Well, John, why don't you just build us a gym?" And John says, "I think I will." Seriously, it's a true story. Goes out, goes to Mizzou, where it's black and gold. It goes all the way around. The chairs are softer than this. It's almost too soft. Nobody wants to stand up and clap. They just want to sit there and say, "Bring me popcorn and bring me Coke and entertain me." It's like that. It's got marble entryways, marble floors out there. It is really a cool high school gym.
That's outstanding. So you went back to your alma mater and coached your son, I believe?
Yeah. I went to
at Stoutland and then at Skyline.
Well, didn't I say I don't play politics?
Yeah.
Well, after 11 years, my assistant coach, he had 2 all-state guys and an all-state daughter that was playing, and then he got moved out of football. He's head football coach assistant, and the little political thing started to turn. They got rid of him. Well, imagine losing your best player as a guard, and then his brother, who's going to be a guard the next year, and we were kind of low anyway. So we lost some games, yeah, but we had people coming anyway. So what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Well, you ended up with your son back at your alma mater.
So anyway, they decided to retire my uniform while I'm still wearing it. They're at Lebanon, and so anyway, Stoutland was right up the road. They had a basketball tradition. I needed 3 more years to get my teacher retirement. Went over there and took my son and played. We had 3 good years and all that. And then my mom and dad had a lot of health issues, so I got technical retirement. Skyline had called me every time it came open. Always said thanks, but no thanks. And I just got to thinking. They said, "Well, how close are you to retirement?" I said, "Well, I can retire." They said, "You can do whatever you want full-time, but we will work with you. You could just come here and coach, help take care of the farm, your mom and dad, take them to their doctors and all that stuff, and just do a part-time thing." And I'm going, man, that might work out really good. And it was a blessing. We were 24-4 my first year there. Won the district and played in the state tournament, got beat in the sectional game. It was a good experience. And then I ended up coaching girls later on.
I saw that.
I went to Alexa Willard that played for the Lady Bears from Stoutland. They called me and they said, "Well, the girls' job's going to be open." And I said, "I've never coached girls in my life." And so they already knew they're changing coaches. So I went over there and said, I watched her play in district and going, "Well, she's 6'1" and she could shoot it and play. Maybe I will coach girls." First 3 or 4 days, I hated it. I got to say that. Not her, but I hated coaching girls. And I said, just coach them like guys, but you got to adjust a few things. And, it's all about people anyway. Got them going. Coached her. She scored over 2,400 points and started for the Bears for 4 years and won the Missouri Valley Tournament MVP, had 30 in the championship game. And then I ended up coaching at Lebanon girls and Reagan McCowan. So there's this little 8th grade girl there, and the AD called me, said, "We'd like to talk to you about the girls' job." So I go in there, I'm thinking I'm going to interview. I sat down, and I'm thinking he's going to ask me questions. He goes, "The job's yours. Do you want it?" I said, "Aren't you going to ask me anything?" And he said, "What am I going to ask you?" I know you, I've seen you, whatever. You'll run a good program. So we got that program going. And Reagan McCowan scored over 2,000 points, broke the school record, and started for 3 years down at Western Illinois. They just made the tournament. She got hurt in December and messed up her elbow and couldn't play basically the rest of the year. But heck of a player. I enjoyed coaching the girls later on in life.
You had a Hall of Fame career, and we're going to put a bow on this, but you had a lot to do with the creation of the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. And I'd like to hear that story as you joined the Missouri Association of Basketball Coaches and you were on their board.
Yep.
And you were learning from guys like Gary Filbert and Norm Stewart and people like that were on that board.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
You know how it is in life, Jeff. About 10% of the people do 90% of the work on some of these boards. But Coach Filbert, we were promoting basketball. We had all-state teams, academic all-state, coaches of the year. We were doing all this promotion. The academics was a big part of it. And so we were in this meeting. I think Rich Fairchild was there, Dave Porter, myself, Coach Filbert. There's about 8 of us there. I'm trying to think of everybody. So Dave Porter from Poplar Bluff at the time said, why don't we start Missouri Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame? Everybody thought that was a good idea. And then we're sitting there going, okay, Filbert, logistically figuring it out. You got to have money, a place to have it, blah, blah, blah. Well, he wanted to have it in Columbia because that's where the state tournament was usually. And we were just talking about how you're going to build it, fund it, buy it, whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking, hey, Coach, hey, guys, there's a guy in Southwest Missouri. He likes sports and he likes to build things. I said, let's go talk to him. I said, his name is John Q. Hammonds. Down there at Springfield, right?
He's only got his name on about 24 buildings down there, right?
Yeah. Right there in my neck of the woods. So lo and behold, Coach Filbert got with Bob Vanetta, who had been at SMS, who had been at Missouri, and Bob knew Hammonds kind of personally. So they got together, and then we got together. It took several months. Hammonds studied everything. They took him to the Final Fours, and he would look at different Hall of Fames around. And the most interesting things, they said when you go in there to look at the Hall of Fame, you know what Hammonds was interested in? The heating and cooling. He didn't look at all the other stuff that much. How am I going to heat and cool a building, do this thing? So he came back, and we're all excited. We're going to do it. And then about 6 weeks later, he came back and said, he's changed his mind. I go, oh, man, this is not a good deal. So lo and behold, he said, no. He said, we're going to build it. I got the perfect spot outside of Springfield. And he said, we're going to call it the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame with the emphasis in basketball. So that's how that got there.
That building's right there on Highway 65.
It's 65 and 60.
Yeah, right there at the big intersection.
Yeah, and by Highland Springs Golf Course. But they've actually moved that. They're moving it in town to another facility to make it bigger, I guess.
You entered that Sports Hall of Fame in 2018. That must have been fun to be in on the founding actions to make it happen and then actually be brought into it as a coach.
Yeah, that was cool. And, in 2009, the Missouri Basketball Coaches Association, I was entered into their Missouri Basketball Hall of Fame. And then I got inducted in 2018 to the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. And that was just a really cool, very humbling experience. But it was for promoting and playing and coaching basketball throughout my career. It just goes to show you if you work hard at something and you try to be a good person and treat people right, a lot of good things can happen to you.
Coach Garner had a good statement about that he just loved basketball. I mean, he didn't have a lot of other hobbies. He just invested in all of that. He loved his players, loved coaching. Obviously, you had to do that to last that long and be that successful.
Yeah. A lot of trips on O'Yeller. When people say, parents are this and that. Like you said earlier, you lay it out there. And I've always told them, hey, if you don't like it, it's not worth just getting crazy. Bring your uniform in, bring your son or daughter in. I'm going to shake hands, say have a good life, and we'll go our separate ways. I never really had one actually walk in and do that, shake my hand and go the separate ways.
Well, I think the story you told about the Three Stooges, the balance that you were able to have with, I can teach these kids something. I'm going to combine hard work and determination with something comical that'll get their mind right. And not a lot of coaches have that. They're either all or nothing. Like, I'm just 100 miles an hour on this. I'm going to work these girls or guys to the bone. But the balance is so important because we are a people business.
Chris, that's a great, great thing you just said there. I think, life is balanced. Like, I might like ice cream and cake, but I can't eat it. You got to have vegetables and everything else. But coaching is the exact same way. And there's too many guys want to be Bobby Knight or this and that, or just too loosey-goosey and be buddy-buddies. I always thought you can be friendly with your kids, friendly with the parents. But, you're the coach and they're the player and they're the parent. And I've always been friendly. I talk to them. I say hi. And some of these coaches will walk right by a parent and won't even say anything. I'm going, well, I'm dealing with your most prized possession. And I want you to know I care about them. I'm going to try to make them to be the best student, the best person, and the best player you can be.
So you're in town for an alumni honor for your career, and you've been in the Sports Hall of Fame at North Central for 20 years. You're wearing a bit of jewelry there.
This is the first time that I've worn this out in public. And, the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, they don't give you one of these, but you can buy one. It's not that big, and the coaches one. But I got this 2 years ago. I came up here. They had the ring ceremony, and they gave us this honking, looks like a Super Bowl ring. It kind of feels like it, I guess. I never had one on. It's really cool, and I really appreciate Trenton. I learned so much here, made so many good connections, and just carried me on through life. Yeah, that ring is something special.
Well, I enjoyed seeing it. I like that kind of stuff. And, we'll just close it there, but we want to thank you for joining us here on the podcast. Is there anything else you want to add to the storyline here before we close things out?
Do you still follow, say, college basketball, the tournament that's going on now? Do you still games? Do you still watch games and go to games and watch the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mainly watch it. I don't go to near as many games. The game has changed. The three-point game it's really cool and all this, but I'm still, kind of like Garner said, inside out. Shoot threes. You can work those in there. Some of these young guys, I see them out there coaching, and they might shoot 35 threes. Well, if you're hitting a bunch of them, you look pretty good. But if you're not, guess what? Hello.
Yeah.
You're going to have a long bus trip home tonight. Family, I didn't mention that. You got to have an understanding family to be in this, no matter what coaching profession you're in. The time away, the birthdays missed, the this and this, the open gyms you have. It just takes an understanding spouse that understands the game and cares about it. And the spouses soon learn where to sit in the gym. They learn where the other people are, and they move away from them.
Stay away from the noisiest parents. Yeah, I understand that.
I did have one more really quick story. Can I get time?
Go for it.
Okay. We're playing at Skyline when a freshman, Bill Barton. We're in a sectional. We go play. I'd started most of the year. And we get there, and Barton, they don't really tell you why they're doing stuff, but he came down and said, we got to go with a bigger lineup. So he pulls me out of the game, went with a taller guy. We won the game. I still played some, but I didn't play my normal. So you had to ride the bus home. You get to the school, and as soon as my foot started to hit the ground, this hand grabs me by the arm. It's my mother, the little 5'3"
Christmas
pepper pot mother that I have.
Yes.
And she said, we're going to go talk to Coach Barton. And I said, no, we're not. No, we're not. She said, yes, we are. So guess where we ended up? We go down in the basement there at Skyline, the coach's office. Coach Barton's sitting behind his desk. Coach Kimberling standing over there. I'm over here in this corner. And my mother, nice as she could be, God bless her, flies into him. He's worked so hard. He's played through ankle injuries. He's, blah, blah, blah. Just giving it to Barton. And Barton just sitting there behind the desk. And he just let her, this valuable tool in life, let her get it off her chest. And I'm sitting in the corner going, I'll never play again, ever. He'll take my uniform away tonight. Anyway, he said, Ruby, are you through? And she goes, yep. He said, I understand what you're saying. Jacky's had a great year. We wouldn't be here without him. He'll be back on Saturday night in the quarterfinals. I went out and played in the quarterfinals, had one of my best games of my career, and we went to the Final Four. I learned something there about coaching from that.
Yeah. You got to listen and deflect and stay on point.
That's right. Exactly. We're very well put, Jeff.
So, hey, Chris, we got another basketball podcast in the books, and we love bringing back some of these stories of glory and great players and games. I know there's other sports. We just did one on tractor pulling, which was a lot of fun. I don't know what's next, baseball, softball, but it was fun tonight to talk some basketball.
It is. It's that time of year where basketball is something about the end of March. Get those juices flowing and basketball stories. And I'll say again, it seems like there's so many coaches and schools out there, and the coaching fraternity itself always feels small. like, coaches that coached. You guys have both coached, the Gottmans. Who would have thought? Family members. It's just a great fraternity, and to hear stories from other coaches and things that we've been through as coaches and players, it's a lot of fun, no matter what the sport, but we're all basketball nuts, so it's especially fun and meaningful.
I love it, and I want to thank our listeners at Show Me Sports Legacies.